Hey, would you give them one more hand? They've done a great job all weekend. Just remain standing for just a moment. Let's pray together. And Father, we come today thanking you for what Easter means to us. That we can come saddled with despair, anxiety, riddled with discouragement, fear of the unknown. And yet when we see that Jesus Christ is raised from the dead, it gives us hope. A hope that redefines not just the future reality, but it redefines the way that we live in the here and now. We come today as a grateful people. We need to hear from you, and we pray that the presence of Jesus would teach us something from his word. We pray that we would experience the reality of what it means to possess a living hope. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Really glad that you're here. I was told by several people that the lines were long for coffee in the lobby, and that's a good thing, I guess, right? And I hope that you'll come again next week. We're going to begin a new series. I just want to mention that very quickly. A number of years ago, I've been pastoring now a little over 30 years. A number of years ago, I had some experiences in my life that really helped me to reshape my understanding of and really give me a vocabulary to explain what I believe in the deepest part of my being about church life, church reality. And I'm going to preach a series starting next week. We're going to do it across all of our campuses on the prodigal son. And it's a profound story. 4 weeks, going to look at major themes in that story. So I hope that you come back for that. I think it'd be really helpful and transformative. Today we want to talk about a living hope. People cannot survive in this world. In fact, people will never thrive in the world in which we're living in apart from hope. You see it everywhere. It's probably more than anecdotal, but when you see, for example, a tragedy like what occurred in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, 3 children, 3 adults were murdered, and somehow it just begins to undercut and underscore the reality that we are living in a world that is broken, in a world that is coming apart, in a world that is at best fragile, and you wonder, how are we going to survive? You can look at events all throughout history, and those same nagging questions come up. Viktor Frankl, who is a noted psychiatrist, a writer, author, did a deep research on how people respond to what he called the brutal realities of life, the suffering of life, the inevitability that life is not going to go the way that you want it to. And he wrote a book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl was a survivor of the concentration camps under the Nazis in World War II. And he interviewed a large number of people that suffered through that experience. And his conclusions were simply this, that there's basically 4 responses to suffering, 4 responses to the injustice, the inequities of life. One response is people just become brutal. And we see this all the time. Hurt people. If you get hurt, you lash out and hurt, and your response is to turn to people. And many of you know people in your life. They've been maybe potentially very hurtful towards you, and they're only hurting you in response to the hurt that they're experiencing. Frankl said there's another category of people, and they respond simply by just giving up. Some people just died. They literally could not handle how difficult it was, and they stopped to care. They tried to escape, and they died. They lost hope. There's a third category of people, and these were people who held on believing that what it was that they lost would somehow be restored to them. And they believed that at the end somehow that their health, their family achievements, their social class, social status, their wealth, their relationships, their homes, their possessions would all be restored and recovered. And many of those who survived the experience in the concentration camps became so depressed, and even many of them committed suicide because they realized that the hope that they were holding on to was not reality. It wasn't going to come to fruition. And so Frankl said there's only one kind of person that can thrive, not just survive, but thrive amidst the inevitabilities and the difficulties of life. And those are people that have a faith or a belief that there's something beyond the suffering of this present world, that there is a God who offers a future, a God that offers a hope that transcends the brutal realities of life, and that hope gives you an inner strength that allows you to triumph inwardly over the outer circumstances of life. So famously, Viktor Frankl said, life only has meaning if we have a hope that suffering and death cannot destroy. Let me say that to you again. It's so important that you get this. Life only has meaning if we have a hope that suffering and death cannot destroy. Say, what kind of hope is that? It's what Peter, in his writing in 1 Peter, the letter he wrote to a people that were scattered abroad. They were suffering incredible things, and he wrote to them in his epistle, 1 Peter chapter 1, and he said, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy hath begotten us again," has literally caused us to be born again unto a living hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that fades not away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready to be revealed at the last time. Now he says, wherein you greatly rejoice, though now for a season. Think about it, he's talking about in the now, in the suffering of life, if you need be, you're in heaviness through manifold testing. And now you can rejoice at the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perishes, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto the praise and honor and the glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen you love, in whom though now you see him not, yet believing you rejoice with joy unspeakable. You rejoice with a joy you can't even put into words. A joy that is so indescribable that you can know and experience the reality of it without ever being able to articulate it. You rejoice with a joy unspeakable and full of glory. That is the kind of hope that Christianity and the resurrection offers you. And that's the kind of hope that you and I must possess. Let's try to look at this carefully today. To answer this question, why do you need a living hope? That's a good question, right? The need for a living hope. Human beings, psychologists will tell you this, are shaped by what their understanding of the future is. So just real quick, I don't have, they put a clock up here. I don't always pay attention to it, but there is a clock up there. What you believe about the future shapes how you live today. If you're worried about the future, what you're saying is, I'm only good with what I can control. I can't trust God to control things I can't control. You're driven by what you do. The way that you live now is shaped by what you believe about the future. The now is shaped by the future. Andrew DeBalco, in his book, Meditations on Hope, said hope is the way that we overcome the lurking suspicion that all our getting and the spending amounts to nothing more than fidgeting while we wait for death. There's a very shallowness in this culture that we're living in that simply believes we live now and we die tomorrow. And so what we do between now and when we die is we spend and we get, we possess, we accumulate, and we're just fidgeting. We're just spending time until we die. Hope actually depends on finding some end to be pursued, something more extensive than merely instant desire. You have to know that underneath it all, underneath the veneer and facade of living in this present material world, even if you have the appearance of success, you're still struggling with the reality. If you're absent of hope, no matter what you have this overwhelming sense of despair. You say, why is that? Because we take the created things, the things that God has given to us to enjoy, and we turn them into ultimate things. And so we move our hope from God in heaven, and we transfer that hope to things and the present world in which we're living. And so now what happens to us is we, instead of having a heart that is set and fixed on a relationship with God and a future in heaven, we keep looking at the things that God has given to us in joy and the earth, and we say, we're gonna find what we're looking for there, and when we don't, we begin to despair of hope. Let me remind you today very quickly that there is no living hope apart from a relationship with God. Secular culture says you are the master of your own destiny. Secular culture said that happiness is something that you deserve. You're entitled to it. You should have it. There's no good reason that you don't. And whatever you have to do to get it is just absolutely fine. And so you live in a world that is filled with people who live by the old adage that we are in a dog-eat-dog world, and whatever dog eats the other dogs, that's totally justified because we got to have at least a few happy dogs. Well, the big dogs are not always the happiest dogs, right? They're just in a pursuit of more. And so the alternative to that is we begin to think, well, if there's no living hope apart from God, then we'll seek a living hope in the context of institutional religion. And let me remind you that religious culture says that if you're good enough, you'll find what you're looking for in this life. And so there's a lot of religious and moral people who think God is obligated to reward you for all that you do to earn his favor. And so you are caught up in this vicious cycle of thinking the better I do, right? If I do good, if I try harder, if I'm more moral, then somehow life is gonna work out for me. And we are rapidly coming to the conclusion that neither the secular or religious culture can deliver what we're looking for in hope. That's because we need a third way. And the gospel says that the hope that you have is by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. That is, it's all by God's mercy and grace and the finished work of Jesus Christ that you have a living hope. Let me explain it to you just very quickly with hopefully a helpful illustration. There's two guys commit the same crime, sentenced to the same sentence in prison. They're going to go to a dark dungeon. They're going to serve 10 years, do hard labor, and upon entering into the prison, they both get a message. Prisoner A, his message is this, that his wife and children have been killed in a brutal tragedy and that his family's been destroyed, it's coming apart, and there's going to be nobody there for him when he gets out. The second prisoner gets a message, and his message is completely the opposite, that his wife and children love him, they're committed to him, and they're going to be waiting for him when he's done with his prison sentence. The first prisoner loses hope. He gives up. He wastes away. He dies. He gets weaker. The second prisoner endures. He gets stronger. He comes out of prison better. And when he walks out a free man 10 years later, he's a different man with a different purpose and a different future in his life. You say, what's the difference? Only one thing: hope. Let me tell you today, let me remind you, this is true. There's nothing that's going to underscore the reality of this. What you believe about your now is defined about your future. And if you don't have a future living hope, if you don't have an eternal hope, if you don't have a hope that survives the world that you're living in, you are going to run the risk of giving up and living in despair. That's why you need a living hope. You say, well, what exactly is a living hope? Well, look how Peter describes this for us. He says, to an inheritance, and I want you to underline or note that word inheritance, incorruptible, undefiled, that fades not away, that's reserved in heaven for you. There's two inevitabilities, right? I know some of you thinking, well, there's actually, here are the inevitabilities: taxes and death. Let me remind you, this is a public service announcement, that your taxes are due on the 18th, I think, this year. That's a public service announcement. But now, in reality, let me tell you something. There's a way to avoid taxes. If you want me to tell you that, just see me afterwards when you can talk about it. It's not the sermon, it's just another subject, right? The two realities are this: that you're going to suffer and you're going to die. And you're thinking, man, I did not want to go to church to hear that. You are going to suffer and you're going to die. Now, hopefully you don't suffer and die at the same time. In other words, I don't want your death to be filled with suffering, but it's inevitable. You're going to go through hard things in life. Life is very difficult. And Peter knows that. He's writing to these people that are living out this life under the brutal realities of mistreatment and persecution. And he's saying to them, I want you to hold on to this living hope. Say, what does that even mean? Well, a living hope is unspoiled by life circumstances. See, Peter says you have an inheritance. Say, what's the inheritance? In the Bible, there's a story that's being played out. The Bible's not just a set of 66 individual books that are moral insights about how to live a life. It's telling us a story. The beginning of the story, God created man and put him in a perfect world. And the end of the story is that God is going to give to his redeemed people a new heaven and a new earth. And he says, what defines the Christian reality is that old things pass away and everything becomes new. Your inheritance is the gift of God's redemption that gives you a new life, that promises you a new body, the body that you've always been looking for, that offers to you a new home. In my Father's house are many mansions, that says to you that there's a new heaven and a new earth. You see, there is an echo from the Garden of Eden that says that there is a better life out there. And there's a memory trace in every single human heart that says the world in which we're living today and all of its brokenness and all of its evil and all of its dysfunction is not the way that God intended for this to be. And God is offering to us an inheritance that is available to us in Jesus Christ. And that inheritance is God's gift to us that is incorruptible, which means that it is imperishable, it is undefiled, it'll never fade away, it is completely and entirely unspoiled. Bank failure can't get it. The Fed can't regulate it out of you. The government can't take it from you. It is an inheritance that God has given to you that is beyond the reach of the destructive power of nature. No hurricane or tornado can touch it, and is not able to be destroyed by human action, whether it be violence, terrorism, or war. It is a living hope that is entirely unspoiled by circumstances. And by the way, if you know Jesus, it is a hope that death itself, physical death, cannot rob that hope from you. It is a reality. That's why in the famous words of J.R.R. Tolkien, he says to us, right, all sad things are going to become untrue because you have a hope that is unspoiled by human circumstances. Say, what is this living hope? It's a hope that causes you to move deeper into joy. You see, here's the problem. You know, we live in, and this is kind of a Western thing more than a global, worldwide phenomenon. We're so addicted to comfort. We're so addicted to ease. We're so addicted to things being given to us and life being simple that we don't really understand the nature of what suffering could do and should do for us. When you have a living hope, it offers you a different way to experience the joys and sorrow that are an inevitable part of life. I don't have time to unpack all this, but very quickly in verse 6 and 7, right, wherein you greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, you're in heaviness through manifold temptation. In other words, your life is literally coming apart, but even though your life is coming apart on the outside, on the inside, you can possess a joy that is pushing you deeper, that is making you a better person. In fact, if you take verses 6 and 7 together, that deeper joy is this, that suffering is pushing you into a relationship with Jesus Christ, and he's becoming more evident in your life, and you're beginning to sense and experience things that you could never experience apart from a relationship with him. In fact, you begin to see that if your hope is in circumstances, then suffering will devastate you. But if your hope, have you ever thought about this? You know, probably the closest word that we have an understanding for hope is dreams, right? Hope dies, dreams die. You ever have a dream die, right? You ever have a relationship you thought, boy, and I see it all the time, right? In life, people say, boy, you know, young people, that's the person I'm going to marry. But then the relationship falls apart. The dream dies, right? The hope dies. I got to have that job, or I've got to have that house, or I've got to have that car, I've got to have that education or that experience. Your dream dies. If your deepest hopes and dreams are rooted in circumstances, then suffering pulls you away from your hopes and dreams, and it devastates you. But if your deepest dreams, if your deepest hopes are rooted in Jesus, if he is your ultimate treasure, that is where you get your ultimate affirmation. Then when your circumstances go south, it drives you into a deeper relationship with him. And you find a joy that is indescribable and unspeakable. So can I use a little, I'm going to use an illustration. It's hyperbole. Do you know what hyperbole is? I'm going to exaggerate for a moment for effect, okay? And in hyperbole, there's always an element of truth. And so I'm going to say to you, I'm using hyperbole, but there's a lot more truth in this than I'm going to lead you to believe there is. The meanest people God ever puts on the face of the earth are parents. That true? The nicest people that God ever puts on the face of the earth are grandparents. See, those two things are not mutually exclusive, right? Those can both be true. I know if you're a child and you're not yet a grandparent, you're thinking, yeah, you're just nuts, right? If you're a grandparent, you completely understand that, and you say, really, it just lives out the gospel story, right? That really bad people become really good people when you become a grandparent. So the gospel does to you, right? So we have 4 grandchildren and one on the way. We have 2 boys, 2 girls. It's fascinating. I wish I had time, but it's really fascinating how different boys and girls are. And I'm finding that the boys, one's 9, one's not quite 2, and the girls, one's 3 and one's 4 months old. How different they are with each other. It doesn't really have much to do with the illustration, but it is different. Our oldest grandson has been an incredible source of joy. We've had him for the longest amount of time, so I've learned so much more about grandparenting and about human nature from him. He is the kind of kid who he has an intensity about his life. He gets that, I think, largely from his dad. And he has, and by the way, has good traits from his mom, good traits from his dad. And he has, in his life, he's one of these kids, when he gets his heart set on something, he has to have it, right? It's like, it's not optional, it's mandatory, right? And he can be persistent. I know sometimes his persistence can drive his mother and father nuts. I'm saying that, remember, this is all in the context of hyperbole, right? His persistence can wear them. His persistence does not wear me out, frankly. I'm like, bring it on, right? Even when he was little, he would get his heart set on something, a toy. Listen, that boy can negotiate with you in a toy aisle. He's learned, like he'll do this. He'll say, Papa, how much were you going to spend? Now, I got to be really careful because I know I'm going to have dinner with all my kids afterwards. I'm not trying to imply that he gets that from his mother. I'm not implying that. I don't want you to leap to that, okay? Please don't leap to that. And I have found over the years that as he's matured, he kind of figured it out, whether it's a toy or coming to our house or going to do something. He has stopped setting his heart on that thing. He sets his heart on something other than that. He's figured out the best thing to do is set his heart on his grandmother. Because if he gets her, he gets all those things, including my money. She doesn't have a limiter. He doesn't ask her, how much were you going to spend? Because it's not spending her money, it's spending my money, right? Can I tell you something? The hope that you're looking for is the hope that he discovered. Your hope is not in things. Your hope is in Jesus. And if you transfer your hope from the things of this world to relationship with Jesus Christ, you'll find a living hope that nothing in this world can take away from you. That's what a living hope is. Say, well, where do you get it? How is it that you get a living hope? So if you don't get anything, I want you to get this. I want you to listen to me very carefully. In verse 3, Peter says, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which according to his abundant mercy, in other words, God who's so overflowing in mercy, God who's rich in mercy, God who has mercy beyond your ability to understand it, has given us a new birth, has begotten us again and given us a new birth unto a living hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. That new birth language is so critically important to understanding the reality of a living hope. You see, the new birth is where you get your living hope from. The new birth is language that is found all throughout the New Testament. Its most notable place is in the Gospel of John. When Nicodemus, who is a religious leader, comes to Jesus and he asks Jesus a really important question. He says to Jesus, these are the words that he uses, we know that you are a teacher that has come to us from God. What he's saying to Jesus is this, can you teach me and show me the secrets to life? In other words, what he's really saying to Jesus is, hey, I'm living this life and there's a lot of things in my life that are visible and there's a lot of things in my life that are invisible, and I know that there's a better way. There's something that I'm missing. Can you explain to me what I'm missing? What is the secret to life? Now, being what Nicodemus is, he's a religious leader, he's a cultural elite, he's an academic person, he's got this vast experience, he's politically influential, He's religiously knowledgeable. And here's what Jesus says to him. It's really a remarkable thing. He says, Nicodemus, you must be born again. Now, can you think of what Nicodemus is probably thinking in his mind? That might be good for some people, but that wouldn't be really what I need. I know a lot. I know a lot of people. I've done a lot of things. Let me tell you something. The minute you start building out your resume and the minute you start thinking, hey, all I got to do is make a little reformation to my life, I got to take a few things out or add a few things in, you don't understand the gospel. Jesus says you cannot have a living hope unless you begin over again, unless you're born again. The new birth is an absolute necessity. It is the one great imperative in life. Think about how exclusive the gospel is. No man, Jesus said, comes to the Father except through me. If I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. If you want to get to God, you come through me, and the way that you come through me is through the new birth. Say, what is the new birth? It's coming to the end of yourself. It is not reforming your existing life. It is dying and receiving new life. It's literally to repent. It is literally to give up. It's literally to say, I can't make it myself. I can't find it on my own. Because the new birth is being regenerated by receiving the divine nature. It is becoming united, spiritually united with Jesus Christ. And to be born again, that's the word, theological word, regeneration. That theological word, that word regenerated, is literally the combination of two Greek words, paleo and Genesis, which is literally Genesis, right? The creation of God. It is to be recreated in the image of God. It is to be united in a relationship with Jesus Christ, where you become bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. And the inner structure of the human heart is radically restructured and rewired so that you become not a broken, fallen version of you, but you're remade in the image and likeness of Jesus Christ. The truth is, you and I could never be good enough to earn our way to a living hope. And God knew that. That's why he's so merciful. He sent Jesus. Jesus, who lived a perfect life, and he died on the cross as a substitute for you and for me. He literally became sin for us. He gave up his perfect record. Jesus was the only perfect man who ever lived, and he gave up his perfect record, and he gave up that record and gave it to you as a free gift so that he could take your imperfect record and actually abolish it and destroy it forever, so that God would never pull out your imperfect record and say, hey, this is what I have against you. Your imperfect record is completely eradicated by the blood of Jesus Christ, and his perfect record passed to you means that you can have a new beginning with God, and in a new beginning with God, you get a living hope. Howard Thurman, a noted African-American preacher, he wrote the book Deep River, which categorizes, and actually it is about hope. It categorizes how the slaves in the 1800s made it through such incredible suffering and did it so triumphantly because they had a living hope. They believed in actual crowns and robes and future glory. Howard Thurman was preaching in India many years ago, and he spoke to a large crowd. The building was completely full. All the upper class in India, which was very much rooted in a caste system, where on the inside of the building there was a crowd of people, lower caste, lower class people on the outside. When Thurman got done preaching, he went back to his room. He and his wife got into bed. And a few minutes after he got into bed, there was a knock at a door. And he went and opened the door, and there was a little boy who was from what is referred to as the untouchable class, from the lowest class of people, the lowest caste in the caste system. And that little boy in broken English very, very politely said, "I stood outside the building and listened to your lecture tonight, good doctor." He said, "Tell me, please, can you give some hope to a nobody?" See, that little boy knew who he was, and he knew where he came from. Can you give some hope to a nobody? And Howard Thurman knelt down and shared the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that little boy was born again. Let me tell you something. The resurrection of Jesus is this. You live trapped in the world of the real. You live trapped in a world where tragedy happens. You live trapped in a world where setbacks come. You live in a world where frustration chases you. Depression is always surrounding you. And the one momentous event in history that changes everything is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. C.S. Lewis described it this way. He said the resurrection is where Jesus punched a hole in the concrete wall that divides the world of the real from the world of the ideal. And through the resurrection of Jesus, through the new birth that God makes available to you, Jesus opened a door and he said, "Follow me through." If you want to escape the world of the real and you want to get into the world of the ideal, it's only through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That is where your living hope is. Is that what you want? That's what you're looking for? Is that what you need? Bow your heads with me, if you would, for a moment. In a chair close to you or in the back of a chair in front of you, you'll find a little card. I want you to take that card. I'll explain that to you in a moment. And today I want to help you. Some of you perhaps have a confusion about Christianity. You're not sure about your relationship with God. There's a lot of things in your life that don't seem to be as clear to you as you want or need them to be. Today I want to help you by, I'm going to word a little prayer for you today that will help you to respond to God's great mercy, to the fact that God has made a living hope available to you, and that hope is in Jesus. Not in things, it's in him. Today, you say, "Pastor, that's a great need of my life, a relationship with Jesus." Would you bow your heads with me? And I'm going to pray that prayer. I'm going to word that prayer for you. And if you, believing in your heart, want to receive the free gift of God's grace by faith, just say this silently. Offer it up as a prayer to God. Dear God, I need hope. When I look at my life, I sense an emptiness. I sense a loneliness. I sense a despair. And what I need is the hope that the Bible defines for us as an inheritance that is incorruptible, undefiled, that's reserved in heaven for us. I believe my hope is in what Jesus did for me on the cross. And today I ask Jesus into my heart. I ask Jesus into my life to save me. Change my life. Be my Lord and Savior. In Jesus' name. Would you stand with me very, very quietly, from heads bowed, eyes closed? Maybe somebody would say, "Pastor, I prayed that prayer." I'm going to come back in just a moment and walk you through how to respond to it. But you say, "I prayed that prayer," and I want you to know that. I want you to include me in your closing prayer, that you'll pray for me, that God will help me to make that, understand that, make that real in my life. Every head bowed, everywhere, because nobody looking around. This is just between you and God, and I'm going to try to help facilitate with you. You say, "Pastor, I prayed that prayer today, and I meant it with all my heart. I need living hope." Would you pray for me? Just lift that hand up high enough for me to see it, long enough for me to recognize it. Thank you. God bless you and you and you and you. Others, God bless you. Somebody else in the balcony. Someone else, God bless you. Somebody else, just lift that hand up high, way in the back in the balcony. God bless you. Thank you. I see your hand. God bless you. Lord, we need, all of us, a living hope. A hope that cannot be taken away or destroyed by anything in this world. A hope that you promised to us because of the resurrection of Jesus. And Lord, I pray for these today that you would help them on their journey to know you and to have that great assurance that comes from knowing Jesus. Mark's going to sing just a verse. I'm going to come back in just a moment.